Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of like with garlic bread. I mean, the only closest experience is like when garlic bread has too much butter on it, and it like just
That's the best.
that
though.
slimy feeling in your mouth of just like the roof of your mouth is like just feels like, I don't know, like the back of a fish.
Welcome to Midpoint, OCC's midweek podcast aimed at helping you connect with last week's message and prepare you for next week's sermon. Let's dive in.
Hey, Children's Community Church. My name is Wesley. I'm the children's pastor here, and I got Brenton with me today for Midpoint this week. Yeah. Following up a family Sunday where we read through the Prodigal Son in a children's story and in the Bible.
Yeah.
Which was
finally
kind of nice.
read through the whole thing.
Yes. Yeah, and not super broken up. And yeah, I got through it, and it was fun.
Yeah. I'm actually trying to pull it up right now.
And that's in Luke 15.
Luke 15.
Took me a second there. Luke 15.
Yeah.
Verses 11 through 32. 32.
Nicely done, man.
Yeah.
So, I think the one thing I wanted to talk about first is kind of how we ended the service on a cliffhanger of there's so much more we could talk about.
Yeah.
But listen to Midpoint.
Yeah.
Like what? What did you have in mind?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think actually it's one of the first things, which it took me 3 services to realize, and I talked to you about this last night. In the children's story, it said verses 11 through 32.
Yeah.
It was on the big screen. Everybody could see it. It does not go through 32. Like, it doesn't even pretend to. Like, they chop it off at 24.
Yeah, it's intentional that they said this is, and I don't know, maybe they were possibly saying if you wanted to watch or if you wanted to read the whole story, this is where to find it. This is kind of where we're grabbing it from.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a little
deceiving.
A little deceiving. I don't know if they were doing that on purpose.
No, I don't think they were doing it to be malicious.
But yeah.
I would hate to be one to write stuff for children's stuff.
Like the WB show?
Yeah, I mean, to some degree. I mean, but like, I don't know. Like, I really struggle with just like, how much do you make stuff appropriate for kids, and then where is the line?
Yeah.
And currently, I mean, I'm holding on to it with a very loose grip, and I'm willing to be swayed, with some good argument. But currently, I'm in the phase of you don't water it down. That's currently where I'm at.
Which I think that's always a good place to be.
Yeah.
Like, you don't want to water it down.
Yeah, because it's too easy to distract from the meaning. And almost every week in children's, let me back up. I like doing children's stories out of children's books because they're much more common. When we did Samson specifically, Samson doesn't show up in children's books a lot. He does some, but in children's curriculum, he shows up a lot, and that was why we chose that one.
Yeah.
In Sunday school, if you teach Sunday school or have gone through, preschool or nursery or any of those curriculums, they include Samson usually. If there's posters on the wall of children's ministry of a heroes of the faith, like Samson's one, and that was why I wanted to do Samson. And there's so many more of those stories that we could do.
Yeah.
But they just don't fit in how we do those services quite as well.
And how we do the ruins.
Yeah. Like this, that was actually part of the reason we did a video for Samson and didn't do a story, because we pulled that actually straight from a children's ministry video.
Yeah.
And nothing against them, but it's tough. Like a couple weeks ago, we're actually behind the church in Acts in Sunday school, so we're catching up very quickly, obviously. But so we just went through chapter 11. Anyway, we went through where Peter gets the vision of the sheep coming down and the animals, and like this is another common children's story that you hear. But you very rarely have that story and Cornelius together. Mm-hmm. And they're very important to be together.
Yeah.
Like, Peter doesn't get the whole vision. Cornelius has the other portion of it.
Yeah.
And he has to go through this whole thing to see the fullness of what this vision was.
Yeah.
And I just think that, like, I thought, but almost every week there's something like that where I'm like, we could do this.
And you're like, this is why we do it.
This is why we do it. Luckily, the curriculum we're on now did have them linked together.
Okay.
But a lot of times it does not.
Yeah.
They're two separate stories. But you really need, especially, like you always say.
Well, I do now. Yeah, now that I've said it. You always need some context.
You always need some context. Both those stories need the other. I mean, that is the entirety of the context of both of those stories.
Yeah. Halves are not always better.
Yeah.
No, I think it's cool. I was listening to it again and just talking through how we always mention context. Like, on top of, like, we need to tell the whole story. Mm-hmm. I think every time we've done the ruins, we're always talking about context. Like, context. You always need context. Mm-hmm. Because, especially with this story, you can easily just pull this story out because it's a story. Mm-hmm. And go, oh, this is what this is what I learned from it. And I'm sure there's some value in a sense to doing that. But if you really want to understand it, you have to get it in the context of how we did it, which is who's in front of Jesus, who is Jesus talking to, why did Jesus do the 3 parables, why is the prodigal son the 3rd parable, because in that way you can kind of see a pattern, and you can understand why Jesus is talking the way he's talking, why he's telling the stories that he's telling. But I don't know, I thought it was really cool how we're just always just naturally going, no, we need to get context. We can't just rip scripture out and go, this is what it means. Mm-hmm. Like, you need to interpret scripture with scripture. So I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Well, maybe we can talk about the first script that you wrote.
Yeah.
Which was good.
Terrible.
It was good. It was good.
I mean, yeah. You were like, it read like one of your emails.
It did read like your emails.
Which, for those of you who don't know, I just email like a devotion to the worship team every week. And Wesley was like, this is how it reads. But it just read like, I read this paragraph and you read that paragraph. Yeah, so it was very instructional and not really like funny. And there were no jokes and no games. And it was like a half hour already.
Yeah, and we didn't even finish reading it. As per you.
Yeah.
You were like, I'm done with this.
Yeah, we laughed because it was so bad.
I think I said another thing like before.
And another thing.
Another thing. Yeah. But one of the things when we started that, which we didn't talk about at all, we actually hinted at some of the stuff in the old script in this current one, in the current script that we did. But some of the things we didn't. One of the things that was interesting that we kind of started off with was the pictures, which we don't usually talk about too much.
Yeah.
But in the pictures are the only context you get in the Bible story.
Yeah.
And it's Jesus just talking to a little kid.
A little kid.
Yeah.
Like, he like puts his arm around him like, hey, let me tell you a story.
Yeah. And that greatly changes.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if like you just looked at that picture, and most likely, again, not that they're being, I don't.
They're not being malicious. No.
And honestly, the people that wrote the paraphrasing of the stories and the people that drew the pictures probably weren't even that connected.
Yeah.
And in all honesty, they probably weren't.
Yeah.
But that we kind of started off talking about that was kind of the lead into context.
Yeah, because I mean, if Jesus is talking to a little kid, and all he tells is the story of the younger brother, then that makes sense that at the end, Jesus would wrap it up and say, see, God loves you. And, that's the conclusion. Mm-hmm. But if you change the context to what it actually was, where Jesus is talking to tax collectors and sinners, which is, I would assume, there were prostitutes there were adulterers, there were thieves, there were people who were just sinners that were not as polished as the religious Pharisees. And so Jesus is talking to not a group of kids, but like a church congregation, like with you and me, of like people who are just struggling with real life and struggling in your sins. And I mean, we're saved, so there's, don't go further into that than what I just said. But that's the context, that Jesus is talking to a crowd, not a little kid. Mm-hmm. sure there were kids there, but Jesus didn't really, pull any punches. But like that's the context. And if you add the full context, then you understand the story and actually in the series of stories that Jesus told. So yeah, but just as eventful as what we just did, that was what the original script was.
Did James preach through this portion in one go?
Yes.
Did he?
Well, not all of 15. Like he preached the lost coin, the sheep, the lost coin, and then the prodigal son. Yeah. I don't think he did chapter 15 as a whole. I think he did 3 different sermons.
But he didn't break the prodigal son up into 3.
I don't believe so. No. But I know that there are pastors who have preached on the different characters. So they preached on the father, then the son, and then the other son.
Yeah.
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 And you can spend weeks on this, which is what was so difficult about this script is you could go so many different directions, One of the things that we did talk about was, and we actually pulled it from the script, but it was the word prodigal. And we were talking about, that's the prodigal son. And I mean, I've always thought up until I think pretty recently, probably when we were writing the script, that the prodigal son was always the younger son, was always the younger brother. Like that's who the prodigal son was. And then I just asked the question, I think to you, and I'm like, why aren't they both prodigal?
Yeah.
And then it was like, well, what's the meaning of prodigal? And it's wasteful with their resources. Well, that was the older brother as well. Like technically he was a prodigal son as well.
Yeah. Yeah. He had all the same resources and chose to.
And squandered it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. He squandered his life, but he was, with the father.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's a term that we use a lot to describe those that are strayed or not with the Lord, and like I don't
believers who've kind of disfellowshipped themselves, one way or another.
But it's a hard thing because like I think that it's used so much that way that we have to accept that as a definition. Like it's used so much like I don't want to like say don't use it that way. However, I think when you go into this story with that mindset, it's actually a little bit deceiving. Just because both brothers have the inheritance and they're both going to get it, whether they wait for it or not, or they have it like the older brother did. And they just throw it away. Yeah. And that was one of the cool things about the first script was that we kind of just had that switch at the end of like which one really is
who's the prodigal,
the prodigal of the story.
Yeah.
And I don't believe, now that we've read it a bunch of times, prodigal is not mentioned. The word prodigal is not used in the story.
No.
Or even really implied. And that's the interesting thing about this story is like every Bible, like I looked in a whole bunch of them, and it is different. It has a different title for this story.
Yeah.
And
do any of the titles highlight the older brother?
No, not that I...
Because it's like the lost brother or the lost son, the good father.
The prodigal son.
The prodigal son. That's kind of the big 3.
Yep.
But nobody was like, the religious brother.
Yeah.
Which I think, the main character in the prodigal son, I think, or the main focus should be the father. I think we tend to look at the son, the younger son, predominantly because of the title. But we think, wow, that he went out and repented and came back. And it's like, no, the focus, again, looking at the context of the 3 stories, well, the first story of the sheep were secondary characters to the shepherd. So the shepherd is the main character because you want to know, like you want to know that shepherd, like that is your shepherd. He is the 99 who leaves the 99 and finds the one. You are sheep. In the parable of the coin, the lady looking for the coin, that's the main character. You are the coin. And my phone's doing something weird. Sorry. And so then in the third story, we were tempted to go, look at the brother or look at the other brother. It's like, no, you want to look at the father, like contextually, shepherd, woman, father, like that's who you like. That's what Jesus is, in my mind, predominantly trying to say. It's like God is like a shepherd. God is like the woman who's looking for the coin. God is like the good father. You know, and if you wrap all those up, you're gonna see God in different lights, in different ways. And I think that we can easily look at the brothers where we should be looking at the Father. Not that we can't learn anything from the brothers, but I think that the point, especially for like the first two stories, we're talking to the people in front of him, the sinners in front of him. But the prodigal son, I think, was talking to the religious leaders. I think that was the parable for the Pharisees. So that was my 2 cents.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah, and we mentioned at the end, but I mean the father in this story, he goes out to both of them.
That was something we couldn't address.
Yeah, there's parallels in if you look at the younger son's story and the older son's story, there is a parallel in how the father treats them.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually wanted to read it again because I'm like, there were so many good things. Watch my phone not even work right now. There's a Bible right there. I think I'm gonna grab it. Can you grab that Bible for me?
I sure can.
As I'm trying to get this up. Oh, it just pulled up. Taking it back.
We are in a cell phone dead spot.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to read this is the ESV. So, and Jesus said, there was a man who had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, "Father, give me the share of property that is coming to me." And so, I mean, essentially, and this is pretty much no news to anybody, that you only got your inheritance, you only got your share of the property when your father died. So the son saying this is essentially saying, I wish you were dead and I had my money. And even in the children's story, we're reading it, and it's like, he just wanted to see the world. And it's like, no, he wanted his father dead. Like, I get you don't want to do that in a children's book, but even like contextually, it's like, he just really wanted to see the world and he didn't want to work anymore. It's like, no, he wanted his father dead. And so this was a blatant, disrespectful, dishonoring thing to do in an honor culture. So this is terrible. But the father, instead of fighting him, instead of doing all that, it says, and he divided his property between them. Not many days later, so he was still at home for a while, which that had to be some awkward family dinners. The younger son gathered all he had and took a journey into a far country. So he just left, went as far away as he could, and there he squandered his property in reckless living. So without any self-control, indulged in everything of the flesh, did whatever he wanted to do. And when he'd spent everything, so he wasted everything, however long that took. I'm assuming it would take at least weeks, if not months or years. A severe famine arose in that country, and he began to be in need. So, I mean, in a severe famine, looking at God's sovereignty, this could have been that, God controls the circumstances. You can kind of go into that if you wanted to. But he began to be in need. So in his desperation, he started looking for help. And so in verse 15, he went out for himself. Like he was like, I'm going to take care of this myself. So he went out and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country who sent him into his fields to feed pigs. Now again, pigs, in Jewish culture, they're unclean. So for a Jew to be around pigs and feeding pigs is extremely dishonoring in an honor culture.
Interesting.
Yep. And so
that makes sense.
But he tried to fix this problem himself.
Because pigs have a split hoof, but they do not chew their cud.
Yes. I think it's you, man. This is why you should put your kids in OCC Kids, because they learn the important things of Leviticus.
What is cud?
Verse 16, and he was longing to be fed with the pods that the pigs ate, and no one gave him anything. So he tried to fix it himself and ended up in a worse position, unclean, starving, and was in need. And so when he came to himself, verse 17, the Holy Spirit speaking to him, saying, dude, what are you doing? He said, how many of my father's hired servants have more than enough bread, but I perish here with hunger? And so he looks back and is just thinking back to his old life. And he's like, man, my father was even kind to his servants. Mm-hmm. And he starts seeing his dad in a different light.
The interesting thing about this part too is going back to what you said when he talks about, basically just saying, I would rather you be dead. Mm-hmm. He knew the character of his father.
Yeah.
Like he knew it.
Yeah.
Even walking away, he knew the character and still was choosing, I'd rather just go do my own thing.
Yeah. But even coming back, he then falls on the character of his father, saying, look, my dad was so kind and loving that even his servants had more than enough. So his father was generous to his servants. And so he's like, but here I am on my own, doing my own thing. I'm going to die of hunger. And so I'm going to arise and go to my father. And this is the key part. This is how he repents. Father, I've sinned against heaven and before you. And that was one thing that we had to pull from the script is why does he mention heaven first? Because all sin is against God first. And then to people, if applicable, second.
Yeah.
And so he recognizes that I've not only sinned against my father, but even worse, I've sinned against God. I've gone against God's commandments. I've gone against God's commands. And verse 19, I am no longer worthy to be called your son. So I'm not in your family. Since I have wished you dead, like I don't deserve any amount of grace. I don't deserve any amount of mercy. Treat me as one of your hired servants. So put me on the outskirts. I get that I've lost that. But if in your mercy, if in your grace, if there's any left, treat me like a hired servant. Because you even love your servants. And you can go into, I just thought of this now. You can look at that as Jews and Gentiles. Even the Father is God the Father is generous to even Jews and Gentiles. Like Jesus could have been alluding to that. That's just off the top of my head.
Yeah, and even in servanthood a little bit there, the servanthood in Jesus' day implied an indebtedness.
Yes, it wasn't a slave as in like the transatlantic slave thing, how we look at it.
Yes.
Yeah, it was indentured servitude to pay off debt or to, whatever. But even servants had some rights, and if a person didn't have a son, the servant would be the hired or would be the heir, kind of thing. Yeah, it's a little different in that. But anyway, verse 20. And so the younger son arose and came to his father. Now I think about this of like he had to walk home, and I'm if it were me, I would have been rehearsing that. Like, all right, first I'm going to say father. I'm going to say dad. No, I'm going to say dad. No, I'm going to say father. No, okay. You know what I mean? Like you'd be rehearsing it and like, okay, I've sinned against heaven and I've sinned against you. Okay, I need to let him know that I understand this. So that whole walk back, that is a humbling walk to be praying, to be stewing over, man, this is what I did. What's the last thing I said to my father? How did I walk out? How did I leave? Like all of those things are fresh on his mind. But while he was still a long way off, while he's still rehearsing this stuff in his head, this is how I'm picturing it. While he was still a long way off, his father saw him from a distance, and immediately, it doesn't say immediately, but his father saw him and felt compassion. So there was no anger, there was no maliciousness, there was no, I can't believe that good-for-nothing son came back. His father saw him and felt compassion and ran and embraced him and kissed him. So embracing him and kissing him, that's intimate. That is love. That is compassion. That's a mercy. That's grace. That's all of those things. And so, I'm assuming the son, after this long hug, embrace, or if the son just kind of broke down and pushed away, feeling like he was no longer worthy. Again, this is how I'm reading it. This is what it's like in my mind. And the son said to the father, again, this is what he's rehearsed. Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. And it seems like to me the father interrupts him because he doesn't get to the servant's part. He doesn't get, if you have any mercy, let me be one of your servants. But the father said to his servants, bring quickly the best robe and put it on him and put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet and bring the fattened calf and kill it and let us eat and celebrate. For this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And they began to celebrate. So the father interrupts him, and instead of allowing him to be seen as a servant, the father says, look, let's celebrate. Like, you know what, let me reinstate you. Let me give you the ring, the family ring. Let me give you new clothes. Let me bring you the best robe that I have. Let me drench you in my love and in my family, like, the family heirlooms. Let me bring you back in the fold. And not only that, let's celebrate. Let's have a feast. which back in those days, a feast, eating with people was extremely intimate, and it meant fellowship. It was a big deal. That's why in the Bible it talks about Jesus is eating with sinners. Jesus went to Zacchaeus' house. Like, that was a big deal to have a meal with somebody. And so to celebrate and have a meal with this son who left was a big deal. So, anything? I'm enjoying this. So,
no, you're doing good.
Okay, so that now his older son was in the field, probably working, and as he came and drew near to the house, he heard music and dancing. There you go. I just wanted to see what that would sound like on the. Anyway, whatever it was, that song probably wasn't around back then. And the interesting thing is he called one of the servants and asked what these things meant. It's interesting that he called the servant. That could be just a nothing thing. It could be like, oh, whatever. Like, there's a servant nearby.
Yeah, he was the guy dumping the water or something.
Yeah, and he was like, hey, what's going on? But it's interesting he didn't talk to the father. Mm-hmm. It's interesting that he doesn't reach out to his father or go in himself. And this could have been midday. This could have been at the end of the workday. I'm not really sure. Excuse me. Verse 27, and he said to him, your brother has come home. Remember, look at it. He calls him your brother. Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has received him back safe and sound. So, looking at the backstory, if this son was gone, this brother was gone for weeks, months, years, I'm assuming it would probably be years because of how wealthy it seems like this father was. How much bitterness could have leaked into this older brother? Like, how angry could he have been at this brother? And so seeing a party, and later on we realize he hasn't had a party himself. So he's like, oh, what's going on? Like, and then hearing that it's for that brother that he has so much bitterness and hatred towards, that he has not forgiven and has received him back. The father has received him back safe and sound. Like, what is going on? So this brother, in a way, you can kind of say it's right that he's a little angry, but you find later that bitterness has not been forgiven. Like, he held on to that. But what he did, I guess you can say he's somewhat justified, not as a Christian, because we're not supposed to hold grudges. We're not supposed to hold bitterness or anything like that. But he held on to that. Like, there was no forgiveness. Mm-hmm. I mean, when the father saw the son, he immediately felt compassion and ran and embraced him. When the brother heard about the brother, he was, verse 28, but he was angry and refused to go in. So the first thing the father did, compassion, ran towards him, embraced him, kissed him, blessed him. The first thing the brother did, angry, refusal, standoff, bitterness, unforgiveness, all of those things. Stark contrast between the two. His father came out and entreated him. So again, this is that parallel that you were talking about. The first brother, the father ran out to meet him. The second brother, he was off at a distance, and the father went out and entreated him. Verse 29, but he answered his father. So his father was like pleading with him, like, hey, did you hear what's going on? And I'm gonna stop here. You mentioned in staff meeting, sorry, dude, I feel like I'm talking this whole time, but you're not jumping in, so. But you said in staff meeting that, oh man, my mind just went blank. What did you say about
the older brother?
Yeah,
that nobody went out to go get him.
Yeah,
that part.
Yeah,
yeah. I was thinking about this, so you can add into what you want. And one of the things that I just was working through, just in we start writing these quite a ways in advance, mm-hmm. So just been thinking about it, and honestly, it just didn't even really hit me until today. Because sometimes I just don't figure it out. Mm-hmm. But it kind of has bothered me that, like, nobody went out to get this brother, like that nobody. He's out there working. They start this party. Nobody's like, oh, let's go get the older brother. But even I started thinking about it after we talked about it today. I think the purpose of this story is to put ourselves into it, and to some degree.
Okay, yeah.
And I put myself in that scenario, and like,
as the older brother, Where's the
just in general?
Okay.
In general, but yeah, in this case, I'm going to put myself in the older brother. So this is a true story.
Okay.
I remember one time. This was at a work function thing, and I worked in this area that sometimes was like. So there was all these different manufacturing lines, essentially. And then there was this other area that like basically you were by yourself. Like you were in your own building by yourself, doing your own thing. And sometimes you had a partner and sometimes you didn't. Well, we had this like work party thing. Well, this area that I was in, like you couldn't just stop. Like it was dangerous to just leave it. And so it took 15 minutes to like shut stuff down or whatever, you know. And I remember there was this point that crossed my mind, like I bet they're going to shut down early, you know, like I bet they're going to shut down early and not tell me, you know. But instead of going to ask, I just let it play out.
I'm going to see if they're going to do this.
I'm going to see if they're going to do it. Yeah, and they didn't. Or they did. They shut down early, you know. They shut down early.
And didn't tell you.
And didn't tell me. And I saw everybody walking by, and then it took me 15 minutes to shut down, you know, by myself. I also could have asked for help, but I didn't do that, you know. And then I went to the little shindig, and I was grumpy, you know, like how dare you guys?
Yeah,
like and I was just like I just thought about that, and I think like I doubt he was the only one working in the field, like.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Like
okay.
This father, he's got servants, he's got people working for him.
Yeah.
I doubt he was the only one out there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But he's like, I'm going to finish this out. Nobody, you know, like I just put myself in the, you know, I think there's a legitimate reason he was still out there.
Okay, that's interesting. I've never even thought about that.
You know what
angle.
I mean?
That he was like, I'm going to see if I see you guys getting the fattened calf.
Yeah. Yeah.
You guys are slaughtered. I hear some noises, hear some things.
And then he comes back and thumps his chest like, I've been out there obeying you.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, man. Yeah. So
like,
arrogant. But yeah.
And I mean, I hope I'm not stretching too far, but like I relate much more to the older brother.
Yeah.
I mean, I see myself as both, you know, like I stray from God all the time. Like, I'm not saying I don't.
Yeah.
But I relate to the older brother. Like, I tend to be the Pharisee.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, me too.
Yeah, and so anyways, that was my epiphany since the an hour and a half since we talked about it. It's like, you know, what would I have done in that scenario?
And you're like, I've done that. Yeah. And I've sat outside.
Oh yeah,
and going like, you jerks.
And I knew even. You know what I mean? Like he knew when he asked that servant. You know, it's like he probably had it figured out. If it was me, like he kind of knew. But he just wanted to hear it, so that was like one more piece of ammo that he had. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if that was me in that.
Well, that seems like his posture. Like that seems kind of how he's presenting it.
Yeah.
You know, how Jesus is telling the story. It's that. What's going on?
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
I know what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I like that.
And then the irony is the servant actually reflects the father better than he does.
Ooh.
Because he's like. This brother of yours, he's back.
Yeah.
And we're
throwing a party. Yeah. We got disco balls and everything. You come on out.
Yeah. And he's the servant, you know?
Oh, yeah, that's good.
Anyway, that's my epiphany.
Yeah. Well, you did mention, like, I think that was what we were talking about, is why did the party start right away? Like why didn't he wait? You know, why didn't he wait until like that night to say, hey, we're going to throw a party tomorrow because Jack's back. Let's do this, or whatever the Hebrew is.
Yeah.
Hack, I think, is the Jewish.
Are you serious?
No, that was a bad.
you just said
it's the Hebrew form of Jack. But anyway, I think in my head, like the first answer that came to mind was, well, why not right away? Like the brother's back. You know, there's been this elapsed amount of time. Let's immediately celebrate. Like, let's not wait. Mm-hmm. Like, he's here, he's back, and I don't know what kind of state of mind he's in, but I want to shower him with blessing. So let's do it. Like, right immediately. Get him dressed, get him showered up, cleaned up, and then let's party. Let's do this. And so I think that was the heart of the father. It's like, no, like, you're back. I'm not going to wait. I'm not going to let you sit on this. I'm not going to sit on this emotion and just, wait until the weekend or whatever. No, we're going to do this now. Like, it's that important. And I mean, it seems to be congruent with the heart of the Father is what we're seeing. Again, lost sheep, the old woman finding the coin, and then the Father. It's like, no, we're going to do this now. Like, this is such a big deal. Mm-hmm. Like, let's do this now because I want to celebrate what's happened.
Yep.
Kind of thing. Okay. Verse 28. But he was angry and refused to go in, and his father came out and entreated him. But he answered his father, Look, these many years I have served you. So again, I'm assuming that's without the father or without the other brother, possibly. I have served you, and I never disobeyed your command.
Probably not true.
But even if it is true,
yeah.
Why did he never disobey? Was it because he loved the Father or because he was legalistic like the religious Pharisees? Mm-hmm. And again, you have to think of when Jesus says in the Sermon on the Mount, like, you've heard it said, don't do this. That's the command. But I say to you, don't do this. Like, it was really God. Jesus was saying, which I could say God too. That's fine. But I want to. Jesus has said it, that you're following the letter of the law rather than the heart of the law. And so, I always go to the, you've heard it said, don't commit adultery. But I've heard it said, don't even lust after a woman. And it's like the Pharisees or the religious leaders were thinking, well, I've never done the act with another woman, so I'm good. But I'm still lusting in my heart. I'm still inappropriate relationships. I'm still my heart has not changed, but on the outside I look good. I'm a whitewashed tomb, as Jesus called them. And so here's this son saying, I never disobeyed your command, but you never knew the Father. Yet you never gave me a young goat, which is not the fattened calf. A baby goat's a kid, right? So I'm assuming he's kind of saying, like, you never even killed a goat for me. Like, I did this, and I've been the good brother, and you've never done anything for me that I might celebrate with my friends. And it's kind of like, why have I done all this? I've been doing this for reward. I've been doing this to get something from you, and I haven't gotten anything from you. But where this son of yours came, again, remember the servant called him, your brother came back. He says, but when this son of yours, so he's kind of distancing himself. Mm-hmm. Again, basically saying son of yours, meaning he's not my brother, possibly even meaning you can kind of stretch it and say, you're not my dad anymore. Because this son of yours, I'm not related to him, I'm not related to you. Like, it could be that type of language. When he came back, who has devoured your property with prostitutes. So he's taken everything you've given him and wasted it away with prostitutes, sinners, all this tax collectors kind of thing. You killed the fattened calf for him. And so he's like, look, he didn't do anything to deserve a reward, and you gave him a reward. I've done everything to deserve a reward, and you've given me nothing. And so then the father says to him, son, again, like, son, you are my son. You are with me. And it says, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. Meaning, everything that I have done up to this point has been for you. I have protected you. I have provided for you. You've never lacked anything. Like, I've given you everything. Like, you've never been hungry. You've never been starving. You have friends, and I'm sure you've been able to go out and do things. So it's not like the father has not been rewarding the son in other tangible ways. And then verse 32, it was fitting to celebrate and be glad. Like, what else would we do? This brother, again, for this brother was dead. For this, your brother was dead and is alive. He was lost and is found. So you have this thing of like, look, there's been a sever of a relationship. This guy, we thought he was dead. For years we grieved. You were with me when we grieved. And you and I talked about this. We've talked about this over and over and over the past years. Again, this is stuff I'm bringing into the story. Why wouldn't we celebrate when we found out that he's not dead, that he's alive? And not only is he alive, he's back. Like, he's no longer lost. He's back. Like, he's with us again. Mm-hmm. Why wouldn't we immediately celebrate? And the brother is just, and the brother's just kind of left. Again, like we said, like, this is the end of the story. And yeah, I don't know. It's baffling to me what the brother would do in that situation, or not baffling to me. It's interesting to me, I should say, what the brother would do in that situation, because what would I do? Mm-hmm. Again, I relate to the older brother of going, man,
Do you relate more to the older brother?
I guess now I do. But I don't know, maybe I guess now I do. Yeah. Because I'm like, what am I wasting my resources? Am I being a pastor so that I can get stuff from God? Am I obeying the commands of God just to get rewards from God?
Yeah.
Or am I doing it because I really want to know the Father, that I really want to reflect the Father and be an image bearer of the Father, kind of thing?
Yeah. I mean, I was raised Catholic, and so I wouldn't say that. I mean, like I said, I don't take this as like I don't stray from God, but I don't know that this story applies to my past super well as the older, or as the younger son, because I think this honestly just makes me relate to the older son even more, in that like I wouldn't say that I was far from God, but as the faith I was growing up in, I mean, being Catholic, like the relationship just wasn't there. Like I was born into it. I mean,
you knew of God, but didn't know God.
Right. Yeah. I mean, even like, like this, we were talking about this around Good Friday, but like the Stations of the Cross are a huge thing in the Catholic Church, but like, it's interesting to me, and I'm not blanket saying this for everyone, but this was my experience in the church. I went to Station of the Cross all the time. It was actually a huge thing for kids to get involved with, and and so I served at those times, and I went to these things, but like that this Jesus that took the entire weight of all of our sin, all of the mistakes that we make, all of the times we turn away from God, and took it on himself, and he wants to know me, and he wants to love me, and he wants me to know him.
Yeah.
Like that was never a part of it, at least in my experience. And it's just different, like going to a Good Friday service now, and experiencing that. So like I don't relate tremendously to the younger brother, in that, at least in my life, like I was never like in a distant land. Does that make sense? Like I'm not trying to pat myself on the back. That doesn't mean I'm doing everything right, because I've spent a lot of time as the older brother, like a lot of time. And honestly, in my conversion process, like this was again my experience. I'm not going to blanket everything. But growing up in the Catholic faith, like you're kind of told you're better than everybody. Mm-hmm. Like that was my experience.
Yeah.
Like don't even waste your time learning about what they learned. Like it's so wrong. You know what I mean? Like that was kind of the mentality, like Catholics don't even hardly consider Protestants as Christian.
It's like that bumper sticker that says, Catholics the first Christian, right. Which is not true. That's not true at all.
Yeah. And so I struggled for many years with just like these these rule breakers, and I still do to some degree. But do you relate to the younger brother?
I do. It's funny you say that, because as a Mormon, growing up, I did think myself better than everybody as well. And when I did ministry in Utah, the pastor out there said it in a great way. He was like, Mormons see themselves as varsity, and they see Christians as junior varsity.
They do. They totally do. I've talked to enough missionaries now to realize.
It's very much like, well, we have the fullness of the gospel. You guys just have, you only have one Bible. We have...
You only have level 2 heaven. Yeah. We have level 3 heaven.
Yeah, kind of that kind of thing. But as I was, in my teen years, I kind of was kind of wandering even from that faith. And for a couple years, I did whatever I wanted to do, in whatever way I wanted to do, with whatever I wanted to do, and whoever I wanted to do it with. And very much squandered what I was given in a lot of ways. And so I very much relate to doing that. And then when my famine hit, and I was like, what am I doing? I had to kind of search and try to figure it out in my own way, and was like, I need to go back to God. And eventually God kind of shattered that faith, but still made himself so real that I, gave my life to him. But it's really interesting how I have been the first brother, the younger brother, and have graduated now to the older brother, And I say graduated very loosely because it is not a graduation.
It is not a graduation.
The pendulum has swung.
Yeah.
And so I will look at other people and go like, man, why are you doing that? Like, I'm so much better than you. I struggle with that pride. And so, yeah, the pendulum has swung. And even as an older brother, I will see myself at times as the younger brother. But yeah, I struggle, I think, with pride a lot. And I think that's what the older brother struggled with was, I've done this. I'm better than them. Why don't you celebrate me? And yeah, it goes to like, why do we follow the commands of God? Is it because we want the fattened calf? We want to celebrate, or we want to have a party with our friends? We want something from God, or is it because we know God? It's interesting. I was talking to my brother about this, and we had a really good conversation, which was great because that's kind of what you want. You want to have a good conversation. And we ended up talking about worshiping God and that he has a hard time seeing why we would worship God, and has a hard time seeing why God would, as a good father, would treat the older brother like this. And so we ended up talking about worship and heaven and everything like that. And he asked me, like, why do you worship God? Like, why? And I'm like, well, truth is, we worship everybody. Or sorry, whoa, that was bad. My mind just went weird. Everybody worships is what I meant. Everybody worships something.
Yep.
Whether it's sex, whether it's money, whether it's yourself. Everybody has something that their life revolves around, something that gives them truth, something that gives them value. A lot of culture today, there's a movement of people who get their identity and get their strength, that get their community, that from this movement. That's I don't think I need to name it, but there's a community growing. It seems that's where their identity is coming from. That's worship. They are worshiping their lifestyle. They are worshiping this ideal, this ideology. And so I think you can see that in everybody, that everybody has this ideology, whether it's family, whether it's, sex, money, whatever. And the reason that we worship God is because God is the only one who is worthy of worship. And so God demands worship from us, in a sense, because he wants the best for us. God is never going to let us down. God is never going to leave us high and dry. God might allow for things to happen in our lives where we struggle and go through pain to be sanctified, but it is not that God has abandoned us. In God is the only way that we can find true happiness, true purpose, true meaning, true joy, love, peace, all of those things. And so to look at God and say, well, how selfish of God to do that. I think God's going, no, this is the best thing for you. Like the best thing for you, is to know me, to love me, and worship me. It's not that God is selfish, and it does say that God is a jealous God, but the reason he's a jealous God, which I believe it says that in Exodus, the reason he's jealous is because, one, he deserves the worship, but two, it's the best thing for us, Like if we worship God truly and truly know God and truly understand that that's the Father that we're going to look like, we are going to mirror his compassion, his forgiveness, his mercy, his grace, his love. Like, I don't see anything bad about that. But if we worship, say, money, and money becomes our God, people, whether, on the internet or whatever, who worship money, they're not always the best people, because they value money over relationships. They value money over family. They value money over truth. They value money over integrity. And so, like, you start sacrificing things, and eventually all of those will lead to death. The only way you get life is through worshiping God. So it's not that God is selfish because he just wants to be selfish and wants everybody to sing Kumbaya in heaven. God really wants what's best for you. and what's best for you is himself. So I don't know. I felt like I went on a tangent there, but it seemed to relate.
Yeah. Do you and your brother have a similar upbringing? I mean, similar experiences and
yeah, he was raised Mormon and everything. He actually went on a mission.
So he's better than you.
Yes, he is. I love my brother, and yes, he's a little bit better than me in some areas.
Yeah.
So he's better than you. It's funny.
He gave me a hug at the end of service, and I don't know. I don't remember what brought it up, but anyways, I was just joking, and we had some common ground in just making fun of you.
Yes.
And I told
figured
him
you'd get right along with him.
Yeah. And I just his hug just felt much stronger than yours. He told me to tell you that.
Okay.
Like it felt, like I mean, I was just very aware of his biceps and it's just so strong.
Thank you.
Yeah, you could just be more like your brother.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah. I don't like to talk about people behind their back, so I just thought I'd tell it to your face.
That didn't hurt at all. Yeah, I'm not going to need to go to counseling or therapy for that at all. Yeah. Thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. I don't think you have to worry.
So, for you, what did you think of the service? Was there anything that, I mean, we talked about a lot of stuff that kind of came afterwards, but just thinking through and kind of now that it's kind of post the service, it's behind you, looking back, what kind of struck you? I mean, studying this story, just looking at some of the stuff that we already talked about or that I talked about was what kind of stuck with me. Is there anything that kind of stuck out to you?
I mean, we talked about it a little bit before, but just that the younger son mentions heaven first. I think that's an interesting thing because I think in our world, I think it's really easy to even look at, not on purpose, but like sin as like a worldly thing too, as this like sin is lack of discipline. You know like what I mean?
Yeah.
And like although that's true, like I think it's really easy to separate that sin separates us from God.
Yeah.
Like it separates us from a good God. And God couldn't be who he is, this perfect, loving God, if he allowed even a little bit of sin.
Yeah.
Like he couldn't be. Like he is a good standard, and that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Like that's so good. Like that's such a great thing for us to cling on to. And I, even in leadership, you just see so much like, he seems like to be a good leader. But like every leader is going to allow stuff to slide because they're not perfect either, know. But like we have a Lord who is always good.
Yeah.
And he is a perfect standard. And like to just think about how monumental that is. And when we sin, first and foremost, we sin against heaven, we sin against God, and we separate ourselves from this perfect standard.
Yeah.
And especially with now that I have my own kids, it can be really easy to fall into the trap of God's watching you.
Yeah. And he's going to punish you.
He's going to punish you. Yeah. Not that I ever say that, but I think sometimes.
But they know.
Right.
They know.
You're right. The tone and the presentation sometimes I think definitely points that direction. And it's like, no, it's actually so much worse than that, but so much better than that too.
Yeah.
Like the divide between you and this perfect God is so far.
Yeah.
And you continually just keep digging that trench between you, and Jesus died for all of it.
Yeah.
And he took all of it. And even if you are still angry at me, don't forget you also sinned towards the perfect Father.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd say that struck me. In a side note, I mean, I told you this a little bit yesterday. Like I this is probably the favorite script that we've had personally, pat you on the back and myself on the back, you know, like you did most of this. I didn't even edit it that much.
You didn't have time.
Yeah.
We got this one under the wire.
This one, this month was just on a personal note, when my schedule starts to form itself and I have no control over it, like that is
that's a sign it's going to be a rough month.
It's just a dark place for me. Like, I don't know why, but this is something I struggle with. When my schedule just begins to mold itself, and I'm just relentlessly like, okay, got done with that next thing. Okay, got done with that next thing. That was beginning to happen. And we practiced this one time.
Yeah. And it was before the script was done. It was not done yet.
Yeah. We didn't even do the games.
No.
Yeah, we didn't even have the games done.
Yeah. And that's credit. Honestly, that's credit to God because we came in completely blind, and I operate a little bit better when it comes to winging it than you do.
Yeah. You do.
And I know you read the script a bunch of times. I honestly had no time.
I know.
So I did not pick it up.
Yeah.
I had it. Yeah. I did not pick it up. Until that first service till 9:00.
And I still messed up more than you, and that makes me so angry.
But I mean, I'm better than you. It's what it is.
Yeah.
No,
but I was just frustrated that I didn't give this script the justice it deserved in some ways. But
we were busy. Yeah. But like I said, we had a lot of people say, "Man, this was like, thank you so much." We had a couple people from Virginia that were here visiting some friends and wanted to go hunting, and so they came to church with them. And they were like, "Man, this is so good. Like, it's so great that you guys do something like this for the whole family." And, you don't shy away from the Bible. You talk about, like, the fact that it went well at all is always a God thing. But the fact that it went well and that well to where this was the best script, according to Wesley, and a lot of other people, they said, this was probably one of our favorite ones that you guys have done. And that it was coherent, that it flowed well, that you and I had the chemistry we had with no practice, nothing like that. Like, truly, all glory goes to God because there's no way that would have happened in our own strength. And so it was really God, one, Jesus telling an awesome killer story, but then two, just God just illuminating this for us to where we could just come in and go. And God was given glory and people could see the Father better. Like, that's just like, that's totally God. That wasn't even us,
And I was telling Heather, I get to this point sometimes that the 2 VBSs ago, I had this happen to me where I just get so tired. Like, I stopped working out last week because I just needed every ounce of energy I had left, And I get to this point where my brain just won't take in information anymore. I don't know, like, if you've ever experienced that.
Yeah.
I'm sure you have. And it was like, I would read the script and then I would read it again, and it seemed like I didn't, like, I was like, I've never heard any of this.
It's like, I have no idea what this is.
You called me at 9:30 on Saturday night and you're like, do you want to go through this? And I was like, no. It's gonna do,
I remember that.
It's gonna do, like, I cannot take in anything, like, it is gonna do no good.
Well,
sorry
kudos.
about that.
No, kudos to you for being, mindful of yourself. Because I think I called you as I was pulling into my garage of like, dude, do you want to do this? It was like 9:00 at night.
Yeah.
I'm like, hey, just call me and we'll run through the script once or twice. And you're like, nope, I'm going to bed. It's like, okay,
I'm toast.
Yeah,
I am toast.
Well, and that was like the only section of time that I had to give to this. And it was just like, it just didn't work out. And God knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
So it worked out great.
Yeah.
So,
I remember I don't even remember which one we did. I would say it was probably either Adam and Eve or Noah's Ark. I can't remember which one, but we did it last year on Memorial Day weekend. Do you remember which one that was? I don't.
It would have been Noah, I think. Yeah, because Adam and Eve was first.
Was it first?
Wasn't it?
I think Adam and Eve was actually second.
I don't know. But anyways,
it was NAI weekend, and we had all those a couple of those teams that came, and they were both like, if our church did that, we would, like, if you were in our town, we'd come to your church. Yeah, and like that felt good.
Like, cool. College kids being like, dude, this is awesome.
Yeah. Like, I'd bring my family to this, but these services are, these services are important to me. I'm glad that we can get families in there together.
Yeah.
I'm going to plug it every single time on Midpoint because I think it's that important.
Yeah.
But I think God set up the family as the primary disciple making tool.
Yeah.
And I also understand that that's very difficult, and I understand that there's a lot of distractions and things that get in the way sometimes of that. But that doesn't change that is a primary tool for disciple making, especially to your own kids. I mean, they're wired to listen to you and to follow you and look to you. And I just sometimes it just breaks my heart every time, I'm not the greatest dad. And then, 10 minutes later, hey, daddy, I got this thing to tell you, Yeah. It's like, do you not remember 5 minutes ago? When I just flipped out, but what a cool thing that God has wired our families that way. And I hope that we can, we're just making opportunities for you guys to do that as a family.
Yeah.
And, ultimately, if it would be a cool thing if, we just all got so good at it that we moved the WB show out of Sundays.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We
didn't need to.
Yeah, we just didn't even need to.
Yeah.
I'd be okay with that, But until that time,
yeah.
I think they're important. If they're not your favorite, that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's different people learn different ways.
Yeah.
But I really hope that people see that we're really trying to be true to the Bible. Even though it's a different format, I think it's still God honoring. I don't think we're doing anything that if Jesus were in the congregation, he'd go, wait a second, guys.
Yeah.
This is not what's supposed to happen. I think there is value in presenting the gospel in different ways for different people. And again, I think back to when we kind of started this whole thing of what are we going to do? We need to incorporate more families in worship. That was kind of the start of this of man, we want to retain families. We want to teach families. We want to elevate the family and the importance that the family is in the church. And now looking at what we've done in the church, we as in God has done through us. But in having kids in service during the music, in doing family services, and in now doing WB Ruin, God has been doing things so that we as Orchardians, nailed it, see the value of the family, and that we as a family are worshiping together, and worshiping not only just through song, but through prayer and through study. We're worshiping together and making it to where we see every believer of any age group and every age group as valuable and loved by God. And that's what we're trying to do with the WB Ruin. It's a fun way to do church service. It's different. There's games and everything like that. But if you really look at the heart of it, it is mom, dad, son, daughter, grandparents, grandkids, all together, hearing the same message, worshiping together, praying together, and then going out and then talking about it and discipling one another and growing in Christ and letting the Spirit guide those conversations. That's what we want. That's what we're going for. And it's just kind of cool that God placed that on your heart and on my heart to do that. And now look what we're doing, 2 years later? Something like that?
Yeah. More on my heart. And then you were just why don't you do something about it, you fool? Just kidding. Just kidding.
That was verbatim what I said. Why don't you just do it? Gosh.
Because I need to overthink it, man. I need to think about it until I convince myself it's a bad idea.
And I didn't give you a chance. I was just that sounds cool. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Hey, James.
Yeah. That was a good one, too, though. Zacchaeus was...
Oh, yeah, it was good.
That was a good one.
It was good. I did like how I almost got fired giving James coffee.
Yeah.
Coffee grounds. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was funny.
That was... Yeah. Everybody, multiple comments of... beans were bad enough.
Yeah.
Just ground up coffee.
Ground up decaf coffee. Yeah. What was really funny is I accidentally put coffee grounds on the slides. And so people thought that it was like the chocolate covered coffee beans, which are actually really good.
Yeah.
And so they were like, "Oh yeah, we'll just give them the coffee beans." And then when I poured it and you saw that it was like everybody instantly was like, "Oh no, don't do it." And I think that's when James's wife was also like, "Oh no, what did I vote for?" And those of you who don't know, James hates coffee.
He hates coffee. Both of those would have been not a great option.
Yeah. So that's why when I tried to give him the latte to wash it down, he's like, "No, because that's worse."
Yeah. The crowd was very nice to some people, but 100% of the services voted coffee grounds.
Yeah, 100%. And 100% of the congregation had me eating butter.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it was...
Your skin looks great now, though. Yeah.
Could butter toast with my finger. Sweating it. Yeah, it's gross. Anything else you want to say about this?
Yeah.
About this, the ruin, or where we're going next? Because you kind of picked the topics of where we're going.
Most of them,
yeah.
I don't know what. Yeah, I don't know what. I mean, I kind of would like to stay in parables because I think they work out well, and honestly, it makes decision making a little easier in a selfish part of it.
Yeah.
Even this next one, the dishonest manager. That's not really a children's story, but it's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a one you can talk about. I don't know. What I'll probably do though is because this one, I'll tell you guys how I came across this one.
Okay.
Why this one came. So it's just reading a children's Bible with my son. And so we actually own the older version of this Bible. So the story is basically the same. The pictures are more updated. But I was reading it and I was like, that's not where the story ends.
Yeah.
Like that's not where it ends. And so I started looking in other Bibles, and I'm even in your office, like a lot of children's stories in there.
Yeah.
Or they just briefly mention the older brother. Yeah. And the older brother was angry.
Yeah.
The end.
Yeah. Even that would have been okay.
Yeah.
Like we would have been like, oh, okay, yeah. What was interesting to me is this was 2 or 3 weeks before, 2 or 3 weeks ago from today. My in-laws were there at our house, and we're hanging out, and as we're eating dinner or talking or whatever, I was like, hey, do me a favor. Tell me the story of the prodigal son. And she's like, what? I'm like, just tell me the story. Just no prompts, nothing like that. Just go. And she goes, okay. And she told the story of the younger brother, and then was like, the end. Like, is that good? And I was like, that was perfect. Thank you. And she goes, well, I know there's more. And I was like, yes, but the fact that you stopped there is why we have to ruin it, because we think the prodigal son, we think the younger brother. Mm-hmm. And it's like, no, it's about the father, but it's about the father's grace and love and forgiveness and running out to meet both brothers. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. And it was like, oh man, this is perfect. This is why we have to ruin this. Because everybody just naturally thinks, it seems, the younger brother, the half of the story. Mm-hmm. And half is not always better.
That's right.
Especially if they're force-feeding you blindfolded.
I enjoyed that part, and you wrote it, which made me feel less guilty about it.
Yeah.
I did put coffee on your butter last night.
You did.
And I regretted it immediately after.
But just a little.
Well, it was more like, I don't know if regret's the right word. I just don't want retaliation. Like, I really don't want retaliation.
Gotcha.
And I usually don't do that stuff, but and it was just one of those, like, honestly.
Like a wild hair.
It was. And it was like instant. I was like, just scoop it or spread it.
Did you put it in the butter, or did you like just spoon it over the top?
I just dropped the butter into the container of coffee grounds and then picked it up.
Oh,
and it just stuck to it.
Who'd have thought? I didn't try to do it. It just fell.
No, I dropped it in there. Like, it wasn't I'll admit I dropped it in there like on purpose. I just was like, what,
I don't know if you've ever eaten butter, but it sticks with you, like straight butter for like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
It was, it was gross.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of like with garlic bread. I mean, the only closest experience is like when garlic bread has too much butter on it, and it like just
that's the best.
That slimy feeling in your mouth of just like the roof of your mouth is like just feels like I don't know, like the back of a fish.
You have the weirdest way of describing things. Water tastes like my mouth, and garlic bread leaves your mouth like the back of a fish.
Yeah. All right. I think that's it. You can close this out here.
Yeah, I think that's all the time we have for Midpoint. Hope it was a blessing to you. Being in the studio with Wesley is always a blessing to me, always. And but be sure to join us in service either at 9 a.m. or 10:30 a.m. on Sunday, or you can join us on Monday evening at 7 p.m. Those are the same services. We don't do anything different. Music's the same, sermon's the same, but go ahead and join us in that. Otherwise, be blessed. Know you are so loved by God and everybody here at OCC.
Yep. Take care.